Greetings, girlfriends, and welcome to another celebrity feature brought to you by the Great Conjunction. Today, the Great Conjunction's organiser, Zay, and I have the wonderful opportunity of sitting down with the multifaceted and multi-talented Brian Meal to discuss all things Dark Crystal. Brian began his puppeteering and voice acting career working with the Jim Henson Company, performing in a wide variety of TV shows and films, including The Muppet Show and Sesame Street, and The Muppets Take Manhattan, The Great Muppet Caper, and The Dark Crystal, specifically as Skek Ek the Ornamentalist and Ursu the Dying Master. After a highly successful beginning with the Jim Henson Company, Brian increased his repertoire of talents, venturing into writing for an extensive range of children's TV, including The Magic School Bus, which I personally loved, Between the Lions, and Eyewitness. Brian developed his writing talents further by becoming a published author. He has predominantly written young adult novels, beginning with his debut novel, Out with Patience, in 2008. His latest novel, Blowback 94, continues a series that focuses on a group of time-traveling teenagers who fall back into pivotal points in sports history. Brian, a very warm welcome to yourself. Fantastic to be able to speak to you after not having you within my grasp at the convention. Hello, say a warm hello to the fans for us.
Thank you very much for having me, and I do regret not being able to make my two opportunities. First to go to the Great Conjunction, and then the other one in Oxford that unfortunately got canceled. But I'm hoping third time lucky. This is 2.5 times lucky.
Yeah, the digital meeting makes it the half, doesn't it? We're getting down with the cool kids. We're on Zoom, and we're making it work. But you know, when I heard that you were going to be coming to the convention, was very excited. And then when you couldn't, we completely understood your reasons why. We all need to be safe in these times. But wonderful to be speaking to you now.
Yeah.
I'd just like to kick off, I suppose. What is your first memory of puppets and puppeteering? How did they capture your interest?
That's a loaded but kind of it's going to be an empty answer. I never was attracted to puppets. I never was drawn to them. I never had any interest in doing them. I was, I guess, maybe too much of an extrovert because I was more of an actor and a full-on performer. And I started out as a mime with a theater company there was 8 or 10 of us in this company, and we should have been called the Noisy Mime Theater because we were not silent. We were kind of a cross between a very athletic dance company called Palabolas and Saturday Night Live. It was sketch comedy, but we did a lot of graphic work. And there was even within that company, there was a puppet company. I had no interest. But I've always loved to do voices. And it gives me great thrills to, do voices and impressions. And I've always loved to do that as an actor. So when I became a body puppeteer for Mummenschanz, which was a Swiss company that's still touring the world, but they became a big hit, and they were on Broadway in the late 70s. I stepped in and was finally silenced as a mime because you're in these costumes and all you had was footfalls and heavy breathing. And I did that for a year. So I really became a body puppeteer first. And I got the role of Barkley on Sesame Street, which was a complete body puppet and very physically demanding. And when I didn't meet Jim for a while, but when I eventually met him, he said, "Would you like to learn how to do hand puppets?" And I said, being a pompous kid in my 20s, I said, "Sure, I'd love to do hand puppets as long as I can do the voices." So he said, "Sure." So I learned to do hand puppets, and it was very much no pun intended about how you put your hand in a puppet, but it was kind of a very backdoor entry to puppeteering. But I've never considered myself the greatest manipulator of puppets, but I got away with a lot of things by doing some fairly decent voices.
Okay, no, that's very interesting answer. I certainly was going to ask, how did you start with Jim Henson Company? But flipping that question on its head, then, where did your interest of doing voices come from?
I had always done attempts at impressions and character voices, and I did voiceovers in New York for a while, either characters, some straight, you know, in advertising and stuff. So I always loved doing wacky voices, and so when puppets came along, it was like the perfect vehicle to do just about any kind of voice I wanted to do, and it was fantastic to be with other, you know, people that love to do voices, such as the original guys and ladies in the Muppets.
Crazy Muppet mayhem. Good
Yes,
opportunity.
indeed.
We've had a lot of good moments, certainly as Dark Crystal fans, with the new series coming out, and other anniversaries that are kind of on the horizon. Here in the UK specifically, in London, we had an exhibition. And they had a really, really nice display at the start of that exhibition, which was a picture of Jim and a quote from him on his kind of his direction and his aims with the Dark Crystal. But what was he like for you on a personal level, if you don't mind me asking? What's your fondest memory of kind of being with him or just being around him?
I admired Jim because he was. I've never met someone who was such an incredible mentor to other people. He was very reserved, and in creative meetings, he'd just sit there and go, oh, good. Yeah, oh, yes. You know, and he would just take stuff in, and then he would assimilate whatever people were saying in his own vision, and he would just encourage people to participate. And the best example I can think of that is when I've got another story about when I first met him, and I was in a prototype Mystic costume.
We'll save that one.
Yeah, but when I first got some training as a hand puppeteer, and you know, basically learned enough skills to be able to do a speaking role in a Muppet insert, which is a Sesame Street thing where I'm playing a character, some kind of salesman character, and anything Muppet, and AM we used to call them. And Jim's there, and I'm like, you know, I'm definitely nervous and all this, but I'm gonna dive in and blow right through it. And he did my left hand, and he was right there, you know, taking the secondary role of doing my hand, and that to me touched me. That here's someone who not only wanted to be there to help, but he took he just enjoyed it so much. He'd do anything, which is another moment is a Dark Crystal moment that I wanted to share. Is on the set when we were shooting the film, my favorite moment of seeing Jim on the set was, do you remember in the Skeksis castle there are all these bugs running around the hallways?
Yeah.
Well, we were all back behind hidden doorways and stuff with these wind up, you know, little toys that had fur and legs stuck all over them. And we were throwing them out into the, you know, hallway, and they'd skitter around. And Jim was right there with us, and he was having a blast. It was like, you know, kids playing in a toy store. And he just got such joy from simple little things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really wonderful, actually. I think that just, you know, speaks to his humble nature, that everyone we speak to, you know, they're able to comment on that. But it's nice to see his humble, creative side as well, like you say, just kind of mucking in. Wonderful.
Yeah, and I think his mentoring ability is why he was able to create such an incredible ensemble of performers, you know, starting with particularly the Muppet Show crowd. He just brought out the best in everyone.
So with your introduction to the Muppets and Sesame Street and kind of performing a few roles there, how did the Dark Crystal kind of first become known to you? How was it introduced to you, and what was your reaction initially?
Well, it goes back to my first meeting of Jim. I think it was probably in the winter of '80. The shop in New York City was doing costumes and building prototypes for all sorts of costumes. And at the time, I was pretty much, Marty Robinson was doing Snuffy and I was doing Barclay. I was pretty much the only body puppeteer around. So they would have no problem dragging me over from Sesame Street and throwing me in some of these costumes. And they threw me into, I went over to the shop and they put me in a really rough version of a Mystic costume. You know, and I'm down in that position and, you know, moving the head around and giving a sense, you know, the designers are looking at it and we're talking about the mechanics with the arms and the hands and I'm giving them what feedback I can. And I'm doing this and I hear this voice, you know, oh, good. Oh, that looks good. and I'm in the costume and I haven't met Jim yet. I'd only been with the company for maybe 6 months doing Sesame Street while all the guys were over doing the Muppet Show in the winter. And I went, oh my God, that's Jim. So when I finally stopped, I met him inside a costume. My hands are full. We didn't get to shake hands. You know, we anticipated COVID 40 years in advance, I guess. But that's how I first met him, was when he came to look at one of these prototype Mystics. And that was really my first exposure to it. I didn't know about the film. You know, as a puppeteer on Sesame Street, I wasn't privy to the projects that he had in development. So I just kind of, you know, had a very kind of, again, a kind of backdoor entrance into it. And I'm not a huge reader of fantasy. In college, I tried to read The Hobbit. I couldn't. So fantasy is not a genre that I've been completely bitten by, but I certainly like the script and the fantastic elements of it, and I guess my most fantastic thing was to be able to be part of this project.
When they started to flesh out, when Brian Froud obviously started to flesh out the designs, and then the creature shop started to build kind of each of the different layers, the latex layers and the costumes. What were your thoughts as you were kind of seeing that original prototype that you were in start to develop into something that became living?
Yeah, I was just kind of, you know, standing back and watching this happen. And one of the things that was really nice was when the body puppeteers were training for Dark Crystal at Elstree, we would train in the same big open space where they were designing and carving the Mystic heads. And I forget the fellow's name who was doing the Gartham, Fred, I think someone. So the shop was filled with, you know, the fumes, and all the designers were on the periphery of this huge space. And in the middle, the body puppeteers would be training and working out. I was doing the physical training of the puppeteers for a while, the body puppeteers for a while, until Emil showed up. And then we went from there. So it was wonderful to be present and very close. I mean, at lunch, we'd go over and see what these guys were carving or molding or that. So it was fantastic to be able to kind of witness the progression of it.
Did you put in any requests for your Mystic? Kind of, you know, don't make me look too fat, or don't make me kind of, you know.
I basically just wanted to survive. And I did sustain an injury that was with me for about 3 months after we finished shooting, which was, there was in the left hand, because you had your right hand in the head and the left hand was here. There was a very hard edge of plastic on your wrist because you had those long fingers and everything, and there were a lot of mechanics, so you were really working your hand quite a bit. And that plastic ridge killed the sensation in my upper hand for about 3 months. And it must have been a pressure on a nerve or something like that. But it's a minor story, but I had that little residue, and it finally all came back. But no, the costumes, you know, it was an interesting collaboration with the designers. I mean, Jim and Frank overriding it about, you know, what was possible in those things. I think one of the biggest difficulties for the performers of the Mystics was the length of the foot, because when you lift your foot, you want to do this. When you have a toe out to here, you can't do that. You had to learn to walk flat-footed to make those feet work. And I think that was probably the most difficult thing, because of having to walk like that flat-footed in that position was not easy.
Well, we've already touched on the fact that you have your enjoyment of voices, and you certainly were able to kind of develop that when you were working initially at Jim Henson. And actually on The Dark Crystal, you were one of the few puppeteers to both perform and voice your roles. I just wondered, what was your experience of that, and do you think that it kind of gave you an opportunity to enhance your performances because you were...
Well, I kind of got to, it wasn't a coup, but I had a double break in being able to perform The Dying Master. And I don't even know, I always just called him The Dying Master. I don't even know if it's Ursu or Ursa. Yeah. It's Ursu. But because in the script, which I still have.
Awesome.
Wow.
It just refers to Skeksis, and it was the designer, not the ornamentalist, so the names kind of change and stuff. But originally, if memory serves, Dave Goelz was supposed to do The Dying Master, and he saw the configuration of the costume and the position he'd have to be in for the 2 or 3 days of shooting, and politely declined. and he, by default, I ended up being in that costume, doing that. And as an actor, I memorized my lines. I came up with a voice. And the initial plan was the shooting as I was just going to cover the voice. Same thing with Jim doing Jen, and Kathy doing, no, she's not in that scene. So I just ramped up a full performance when we were shooting those scenes, doing the voice and everything. And after the shooting was done, there was an older English actor who came in to do the dubbing of the voice. And as I heard it, Jim was like, I kind of like Brian's better. So I was able to, in April, I actually, you guys, I actually went through my date books. Some of us still have date books.
Yeah, 1981, I can see it.
We don't have e-calendars. And I actually found the dates of the 4 times I did the voice for The Dying Master, and in 3 different countries over a 1.5-year period of time.
Wow.
So, the first one was April 15th, 1981, and it was the very first day of shooting. So that was just the covered stuff. In August, in 81, before I went back to Sesame Street, Jim grabbed me, we went to a studio, and we recorded it properly in a studio. And then there was rewriting going on in post. The script kept changing, even though the lip sync stayed the same in the picture. So in the New York City, I did it in early 82. I redubbed it in January of 82 in a studio in New York. They rewrote the scene again. And in August of 82, while I'm in a production of Henry IV Part 2, and I have to be back that night for a show, I was flown to Canada, to Toronto, to record what finally got into the movie. And it was mainly because of just little rewrites on the scene. It was tough getting back to that show, particularly when the U.S. custom agents, Jim and Frank, had not informed them that I was coming there to work for one day.
Oh.
So I was taken aside by Canadian Customs, and I was when I finally recorded it, and I was a bit in a panic about getting back to New York City. I was escorted onto the a plane by Canadian police to make sure I left.
Canada's most wanted.
So I know the recording of that was quite an epic, a journey in itself. But it was always great fun to do. The voice pretty much was the same. It never really changed that much, but the scene kept getting shaved down a bit.
Did you base the voice on anyone kind of familiar to you, or any kind of inspiration for it specifically? Or
No, all I did was I tried to come up with the oldest sounding voice I could that, was also, a creature that was also breathing its last. So I just went full on with that. And I just watched it the other day to refresh my memory.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool to watch.
Oh, nice.
Can you still do the voice, Brian?
I've got a little thing I'll do for you at the end if you get to the part about if I've got anything to say to all the Dark Crystal fans.
Excellent.
Brilliant. We absolutely will ask you that. Well, he certainly wasn't the most mobile of mystics, certainly not as mobile as the others, and they weren't very mobile themselves. But were there any physical difficulties whilst you were filming, perhaps especially whilst sitting in the mystic chair?
Well, I think I told Zay about, I was in that for 2 to 3 days. Of course we'd break for lunch, but you were in a reclined position with a ton of weight on your right hip, and then you have to raise up and you'd be moving to animate the head and everything. So after the 2 or 3 days of shooting that we did, I had bed sores from the platform that I was on. But no, it was good. Zay, do you want me to tell that other story?
Yeah, tell the other story. That's a great story.
Tell the other story. Tell the other story.
Well, the first day of shooting was April 15th. It was a Tuesday, and it was a 3-day bank holiday. Living over in England, I couldn't believe how many bank holidays you guys have over there. And I'd had a bit of a liquid weekend, drinking with friends, and I was in the costume that Tuesday morning for about 2 to 3 hours while the lighting crew lit the inside of the cave and the set. So they got me in the costume, and they got all the puppeteers that are working the tail and some features and stuff. They're underneath. I'm kind of locked into this costume. And by the time we got to shooting, there's also a live waterfall running in the cave. By the time we were ready to shoot, 3 hours of lighting, I went, I'm sorry, I got to get out and use the restroom. And I forget the amount, but Dusty Simmons, the first AD, busted my chops and informed me very specifically how much that 45-minute break of getting out of the costume, running off to the loo, and coming back into the costume cost the production. So it was a very expensive pee.
Spent just a little bit more than a penny.
Yes, exactly. A few £1,000, I think.
Yeah. Well, we actually have a fan question we'd like to ask off of the back of you playing Ersu. It's from Natasha Satari. When preparing for the role of Ersu, were you provided with any background information, especially about the relationship between Ersu and Jen, that wasn't perhaps present in the film?
Not really. I mean, you got to understand that this is prequel, all the different product and stuff that is subsequently been written. But all we had was a script, and the script is very simple. That this is his master, and they obviously were close, and he's giving him his quest. It was that simple. So I made a lot of kind of acting notes and stuff in the script, and basically was trying to play the emotion of it, of a goodbye scene, and also imbibe it with a sense of he's someone who's very near and dear to the Dying Master.
With Jim performing Jed, was it quite nice kind of having those moments so you were able to kind of build your professional relationship with him as well as kind of playing those characters?
Yeah, by that time, I'd been spending a lot of time on the Muppet Show set and various other places with Jim and on Sesame Street. So particularly after I cost the production 5 minutes, I wasn't schmoozing in the cave and wasting any more time.
Well, I'd like to talk about one of the other main characters that you perform now, which is Skekek the Ornamentalist, or I like the fact that you referred to them originally as the designer. Probably was the most feminine of the Skeksis, arguably. In the remake, or rather the sequel, or rather the prequel, Age of Resistance, it was voiced by a female. It was voiced by Alice Dinian. How did you interpret the character though? Did you receive any additional direction from Jim and Frank at all?
Because there were a dozen Skeksis, you know, I don't think we were getting. I don't remember specifically a lot of direction. I just grabbed a voice and went with it. Given, you know, it's 1981, I could have my wrist slapped for you know, playing such a flamboyant character, being an ornamentalist, but at that time I just decided, you know, to play him as this, and in the script he was definitely the scaredy cat of the Skeksis, so I just played him as a flamboyant knucklehead who just was overreactionary and all of that, and had fun with it. I mean, there wasn't that much of his stuff. There were other Skeksis that were much more important to the story.
Particularly personally, I love the moment where the Gelflings start to enter into the castle. And I think it's the Ornamentalist and the Gourmands that are walking through the hallway and they first see...
They freak out.
I love that moment. Yeah.
They absolutely freak out. And my partner, I forget which I was always next to Bobby Payne. Bob Payne played, I forget which one he played, which Skeksis he played, but he was always next to me in the banquet scenes. And Bobby was very naughty, is still very naughty. And when I would get my costume sometimes in the morning, he would put really outrageous pictures in my costume that would greet me early in the morning. So he was a bad boy.
That's awesome. So it kind of put you in this heightened state already.
Yes, exactly.
Surprise. Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe that was the seminal moment of why I took it that way, is because of some picture he hung on my costume.
By the way, Brian, look down.
Right.
What was it like then, kind of being able to play both Mystic and a Skeksis? Kind of what were the benefits and the joys and the potential hardships of performing both?
Well, the greatest benefit from playing a Skeksis was I got to stand up, and I was comfortable, and it was a nice break from the Mystics and the Garthim, which I did a bunch of the Garthim too. But you know, so it was not as physically demanding. So it was nice to be in the Skeksis castle in those outfits, except for the pictures that I have to be subjected to. But the Skeksis was, you know, it was more like doing a regular hand puppet. I mean, you had a costume around you, but it was basically that configuration of doing a hand puppet with the wall. So it was fairly standard stuff. Just looked a lot different.
Well, being quite an extrovert, was it quite a nice release to be able to, as you say, physically to be hunched over as a Mystic, but to perhaps allow your personality to break out with the Skeksis as well?
I've never thought of it that way, but maybe so. Maybe that's why he was so loud. He was actually very happy.
Yeah, I'm not a Mystic anymore.
Be upright. Yeah.
No, great. Well, I don't like to use the word minor, but were there any other kind of minor puppeteering roles, or ones that you weren't credited for, ones that we wouldn't know about, that you auto performed in the film?
Well, we all the puppeteers performed some of the pod people, the big crowds, pod people scenes. Sometimes you'd have two pod people puppets, you know, because they wanted as many puppets as they could. I mean, there were non-puppeteers that would come in and put on a puppet, you know. I mean, so a lot of the behind the camera people finally got to put a puppet on, you know, for big crowd scenes and stuff. And Jim loved doing that, you know, getting people in there. I would say the only other character that I enjoyed playing was the Gartham, because it was physically. It was physically like being in a second position ballet position, which I did some ballet way back when. So literally you're in second position, but with 75 pounds of costume on top of you, and you're walking in a slightly down position. So it was a very physically taxing, but also a lot of fun because of the destructive nature of those things. And I'm pretty sure, I bet a little money, that I was the Gartham that bust through the wall in the pod village. And
Yeah.
we had one take at that because we were really destroying, you know, a breakaway piece of the set. And I think we got it in one take, and it's in the film and it looks great.
Oh yeah.
When
Looked like a
Gartham
lot of
busts
fun.
through, right? Right? Yeah. And having those great big, you know, I played American football, and it was just like what we call a forearm shiver. Having those big claws and being able to bang into stuff was that appealed to me.
Were there any innocent podlings harmed in the filming of the scene, or?
I don't think any. I think you know, the whatever the pod people equivalent of the ASPCA was okay with it. Nobody was. The biggest danger in puppeteering is falling off of a platform.
Yeah.
That's the danger, because there's trenches. There's all these trenches. And if you're not watching where you're going, you can fall. And I've taken a fall into one of those trenches and usually ended up with bloodied shins. Yeah.
Like you say, especially with the weight of the Gartham outfits as well, because I know you had to hang up in your frames
Yes.
between takes. Did you come up with any inventive ways to entertain each other whilst you were just kind of swinging in the breeze?
No. And the good thing was, you know, there was no place to put pictures. So, you know,
Yeah. A trauma-free zone.
But I will tell you about one scene that was shot in the Mystics. There's that sunrise shot where the Mystics are moving across the side of a hill. And that was shot on a hill in the back of L Street at dawn. They wanted natural light. And the whole line of Mystics probably had to walk, as a long shot when we were shooting it, pre-editing. We probably had to walk 40 to 50 yards in that position. And all of our physical leg training was, we knew we had to do that shot. And that's, we made sure that our legs were in great shape, and we were able to do that because you couldn't raise up as a Mystic. You had to stay down low and keep that foot thing going. And we shot it. It was pretty tough, but we got it done. And then we went to Rushes like a day or two later, and we're looking at the shot, and there's a colored line through the entire footage, and it was unusable, couldn't be fixed. So we had to shoot it again. and that was probably the unhappiest moment. We almost had maybe 2 or 3 dying Mystics. But we did shoot it again, and it's a great looking shot, so it was worth it.
I wonder if one of you had just given up, then your counterpart Skeksis would have just gone, oh, I've had enough as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you gave up and rolled, you would have rolled down the hill, because we were walking on this kind of trail ridge. It would be fun to see a Mystic just go boom, boom, boom.
Oh, great. I think with the new Age of Resistance series, they had a blooper reel that kind of came out. I would love to see some sort of blooper reel from the original film. I bet there'd be some great moments.
Tobias, one of my biggest regrets was when we were shooting, I believe I was over there again for the Great Muppet Caper. and they were editing at Elstree. And I kept walking by the editing room when we're shooting that, and I'm seeing all this film in garbage cans. And they were literally throwing out 35 millimeter film that they weren't going to use. And to this day, I regret just not
Yeah.
Just take the whole
taking
bit.
what I could, because I'm pretty sure some of that was Dark Crystal stuff.
Yeah.
I'd like to have seen if there was any Muppet Caper stuff as well. Muppet
There
Caper is my favourite Muppet film.
Oh, okay. I'm sure they were shooting it then, so I don't know. But yeah, but that's what they did. I mean, the stuff got tossed.
Not part of it. It wasn't part of the process back then, was it? Now it's all kind of DVD extras and behind the scenes documentary.
Everyone keeps everything.
Yeah.
Which is good and bad.
Well, perhaps your most memorable scene might be that walking at dawn, but what would be your most memorable kind of positive moment from filming Dark Crystal? What did you take away from it the most, do you think?
Well, I'll give you the two extremes. One was again, this was Jim at his finest and just everyone having fun. When we were up in the catwalks above the forest scene and we were dropping those spiked plants that then get reversed, that was so much fun. It was like we all had tons of them and we're just dropping them like darts or, sharp bombs and seeing where we could stick them in the styrofoam, the set and everything. That was fun. And again, Jim was, enjoying that immensely as everyone did. But it's fairly obvious. I really enjoyed shooting the Dying Master scene again, because I was able to really perform an act in a scene. It was a scene. It was dialogue between two people. I'm doing a voice, and two creatures rather, and that was the first time I'd ever done any kind of extended scene with Jim. So that will always be special to me.
Great memory. If you could have played any of the other roles, then are there any particular ones where you kind of thought, oh, they're having a good time, I'd really enjoy playing that? Or
my best answer for that is I think I played enough.
You'd suffered enough pain. You didn't want to squeeze yourself into any other puppet.
And enough pain and enough joy. That's one of the reasons I think I also got a shot at doing the Dying Master, is because they knew from my body puppeteering that I was a masochist.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't complain too much.
Well, as you said at the start, unfortunately, you weren't able to be with us at the Great Conjunction, and you were sorely missed. But I did ask each of the celebrities on stage if they did have any words for the fans, but also what they thought that the future might hold for the Dark Crystal, obviously with all of its new activity that's come about and its resurgence, if you will. How exposed have you been to that, and kind of what are your thoughts with it going forwards from what you've seen?
I've always been shocked that the movie became such a cult classic. I really didn't expect it. I recently, my daughter recommended I watch Neverending Story, which was made 3 years after Dark Crystal. And the reason she recommended it was because of so much of the puppeteering technique was in there. And it was interesting to see the technique. I found it a little too episodic but wonderful film nonetheless. So I was kind of shocked, and I was, as many people I think who worked on the film, I had no idea that this thing would have such a life and a following, and to see it, all the offshoots from it, which I did a little research before this interview, and I had no idea of the books, the comic books. I am embarrassed to say I have not seen Age of Resistance yet. I've been busy with my own books, but I'm planning to see it. I'm looking forward to seeing it, particularly after realizing, oh my gosh, this thing it's a little more than a cottage industry. So it's very cool that it's gone off, and now I understand why Zay and you are doing these conventions and Comic-Cons, and why there's such a big following. And one of my friends from the movie will just add, although we did not meet at the Great Conjunction, we may meet at another one.
Hey!
That's just made mine and Tobias's year.
Yeah, that's it. Die happy. Done.
2020 has just gone so much
Yeah.
better.
I listened to the voice again, and I went, you know, if I had to reconstruct that voice from just memory, I wouldn't have been able to. So it was interesting to see the voice and realize that basically at heart, I've just always been a really old man.
Yeah. Yeah, was it a little bit easier now that you kind of gained some...
I know, I'm feeling a little more comfortable.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much, Brian. I mean, it's been such a pleasure. It is always a pleasure speaking with everyone from the Duck Crystal, but when we speak to each and every one of you, you all bring your own unique take and your own kind of presence, and it's been fantastic. Thank you very, very much for your time and joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight, and I do hope to see you soon.